Welcome to another episode of the Rare Liquid podcast. And today I'm interviewing one of the most impressive people that I've just ever spoken with. And if you listen to this episode, you'll really understand why. To give you a brief introduction of her, her name is Tvisha, and she is a product manager at Microsoft and has worked on products in the AI, cloud, cybersecurity, and Internet of Things space. She's also a two-time Forbes 30 Under 30 scholar and owns multiple patents. She got her bachelor's in electrical engineering at USC, master's degree in computer science at Columbia, and is a fellow Wharton MBA classmate. The craziest thing about her, though, is that she worked full-time at Microsoft remotely while also pursuing her MBA, which is just crazy because working full-time is so demanding and exhausting. And also getting an MBA is very, very time consuming as well. So it's truly just one of the most impressive people that I've ever really met. And so I hope you enjoy this episode. But before we get started, if you're tuning into this episode because you're interested in breaking into a product management role, then I highly recommend Exponent, which is one of the top resources for product management and tech interviews. And you can get started with it for as little as $12 a month. Exponent has been around since 2018 and has one of the best product management online interview courses out there that's taught by PMs from tech companies like Amazon, Google, and Meta, as well as top startups. My Wharton MBA classmates highly recommend Exponent, and their PM courses include everything you need for your interview, including prep for product design, product strategy, analytical and execution questions, and a whole lot more. Exponent teaches what interviewers are looking for, provides a framework for how to approach the question, breaks down how you'll be evaluated across interview rounds into clear rubrics, and includes a catalog of over 100 mock interviews with real PM candidates. Exponent also has interview prep courses for other roles, including software engineering, machine learning, engineering management, data science, and more. So if you want to join the over 500,000 people who have used Exponent, including my Wharton MBA classmates, for tech interviews, then I highly recommend that you check out Exponent. I'll leave a link to all of it in this episode's description. And be sure to also use my code rareliquid to get 20% off. All right, Tvisha, thanks so much for making the time today. And can you start off by just giving us a background of yourself?
Yeah, happy to. So I grew up in Mumbai, India. I moved to the US for undergrad, where I went to USC. I studied electrical engineering for undergrad. I then got a master's in computer engineering from Columbia University, after which I started working as a product manager at Microsoft, which is what I've done over the last 4 years. And then I also got an MBA from Wharton now along the way.
Awesome. And a lot of people, or what made you want to go to Columbia and get a master's degree after your time at USC?
I studied EE in undergrad, which is electrical engineering. While I really enjoyed the degree, it was a lot of fun. We got to do some really cool things, like build an electric guitar from scratch, build an automated greenhouse. I realized that there weren't a ton of jobs after college in EE that I was really excited in. And they also didn't pay super well. So I decided I wanted to pivot more to software and work in big tech. And that's one of the reasons why I got a master's degree in computer engineering from Columbia. I also was really interested in taking courses in AI, machine learning, deep learning, all that good stuff. So that's another thing that I was able to accomplish. Lastly, I kind of wanted to explore New York City.
Gotcha. Yeah. So LA versus New York, between the two coasts, like where do you enjoy more?
I think for me, it's definitely LA. The weather is a huge factor. I love the beach. I love the good weather. My first winter in New York was also the polar vortex. So I think I just had a really bad experience. So for me, it's LA.
Got it. Makes sense. And you've also been very involved in some very kind of hot, sexy tech trends, which are like AI, Internet of Things, machine learning, etc. And if you were to kind of think about these kind of industries you were in, like how did your work kind of land in each of these kinds of different industries? Like where did you spend a lot of your time?
Mm-hmm. So over the last few years, I have spent a lot of time working at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. In general, I'm incredibly passionate about emerging technologies. I think there's a lot of scope for this in the future that we're going into. I personally think that AI is not going to replace anyone in the short term. It's more of a productivity tool that I think will enhance our productivity. as for the long term, it probably will automate some jobs, but I think it will be more jobs that don't require as much skill.
Well, yeah, hopefully there won't be AI in the future that replaces like conversations like this, but we'll see. I mean, it's possible.
I don't think so, but we'll see.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen in the future, I guess. But you went straight into Microsoft after Columbia, and I was wondering, like, when you were recruiting for big tech, did you have just a list of different companies you were interested in, and you kind of put your resume everywhere, or was Microsoft kind of like one of your top choices? How were you thinking about your recruiting process back then?
Microsoft was definitely one of my top choices, but I was applying everywhere. Product management entry level roles are very scarce. There's literally barely any. Most APM programs take between 10 to 40 people a year. So it was incredibly small. It was very coveted, very hard to get. In fact, I had convinced myself I would not get a product management entry level role. So I was also interviewing for software engineering and data science. So I really wanted to cast as wide a net of possible. And I was really happy when the product management role at Microsoft worked out because it was sort of a dream job after college without any experience.
And why was product management in particular what interested you besides data science and engineering?
So as much as I love data science and engineering, I knew that entry level software engineers, for example, they work on very specific features where they build out a specific feature and they're told exactly what to do by their management chain and by the PMs in the org. I didn't want that. I wanted to have the ability to influence the entire product lifecycle, to really see how a product goes from ideation to an actual product, how to work with customers, how to speak to customers, how to improve the product over time, how to achieve product market fit, how to focus on generating revenue for the company and making the best possible product out there. This is going to sound really cheesy, but people often say that product managers are seen as mini CEOs of their product. And so they have to learn to work with many different aspects of the product. So they have to work with engineers, they have to work with people in design, they have to work with the sales folks, they have to have recurring calls with leadership where they kind of talk through updates about the product and strategy, direction in which it's going. And that appealed to me a lot more. So that was one of the reasons I...
Yeah, and when you talk about being a mini CEO of your product, I've actually heard from some of my PM friends that while that is true, a lot of times what can be a little bit disheartening about the job, and I wanted to get your take on this, is that the feature you work on could be like very, very small and may not actually be super impactful. And then so that's something that's kind of not as well understood about the PM role. Maybe you actually at Microsoft, you worked on a big project, and so maybe you didn't have this issue, but is there any validity to that?
100%. I think I was very lucky in that my first job out of college, I got placed on an emerging cybersecurity team. And so most of the products I've worked on, I've worked with someone else to come up with the idea. So I joined the product in the ideation phase. And so I was one of the key people that helped build out the features for the product, worked with engineering, helped get funding from leadership and things like that. So I recognized that I was there definitely was a luck piece involved. I am very privileged to have only worked on emerging or new products. But I think if you get placed on an existing product, Word, Office 365, you never know what you might end up working on. So that is definitely something that does happen. I think the further along in your career you are, the more scope you have for impact. So maybe you might start working on one feature in Word, but then 5 years from then you might own Word as a product manager. So it just really depends on your career trajectory and things like that. So
yeah, that's true. And I guess like you can't be too choosy when you're just starting off as a PM.
exactly.
You can't think that you're going to design the entire app. Yeah, and then do you think that there's a huge difference between working as a PM in like a startup versus like a big tech company then?
I would say yes. I think in a startup, you have way more scope for impact when you start out. I also think that in a startup, you usually have to wear various different hats, which is a great skill for a PM to have. And so I would say if you do have the opportunity to work on an emerging product at a startup, then I would recommend that over maybe working on a very specific feature in a bigger product because it's much easier to make impact there. But I also think going down the startup route has its own issues, high risk, high reward. So it really just depends on you and what you want out of your career.
Yeah, and probably a lot less like mentorship and processes that are built out, and a lot of things you kind of have to like build from scratch on your own. I also wanted to, as you were talking about, you said you're kind of lucky with the projects you were put on and stuff. I wanted to ask about any of the projects that you feel like were pretty exciting for you to work on, and kind of, I know you don't always start from start to finish on as a
Mhm.
PM on everything, but maybe what kind of impact you were able to make on any of the cool projects you worked on.
I think it's hard for me to share a lot of stuff because, of course, we have to sign an NDA. And the product that I'm currently working on, we haven't externally released it. The patent is still pending. So I can't talk too much about it. But I personally feel like I've had the opportunity to work on some really cool products at Microsoft. As I mentioned, they were kind of emerging products. I also love the fact that being in cybersecurity, I feel like I'm working towards making the world a better place by building out some of these products, because the goal is to catch the bad actors as soon as possible. And we're also leveraging AI and other emerging technologies to build kind of the newest, best products out there. So the product that I'm working on right now, no one else has built it before. And I think that is one of the coolest things that you can get from working in a field that is emerging and working at a company like Microsoft, which is always trying to kind of push the front line, be the first one there. So I have really liked my experience so far working as a PM at
Yeah,
Microsoft.
that's I feel like this might kind of sound like a dumb question, but AI is, right now and probably for a very long time going to be the hottest tech trend that's going to be out there, and one of the most impactful, if not the most. And it's always moving so fast. And I get a little intimidated trying to just think about like, oh, how would I work in that industry? And it seems like it'd be just so hard and challenging. I don't know. Do you find that once you're in the industry, is it kind of work that's similar to others, or do you find it orders of magnitude kind of harder than if you were to work on some other type of product?
I don't think it's orders of magnitude harder necessarily. It really depends on the application of AI. So as I mentioned, I kind of see AI as a tool. And sometimes you have a tool that's already been applied to an existing problem where it's very easy to then take what's already been done and reapply it to a different problem. But sometimes you're using this tool to kind of do something that's never been done before. And I do think that is a lot harder because you're almost in this experimental stage where you're trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, how can we achieve product market fit, like what is the best possible way to leverage this tool in a specific domain or a specific industry. So I would say it really depends on what you're building. I don't necessarily think it's orders of magnitude harder.
Mm. I mean, do you ever, as you're working, I don't know, your brain start to hurt because you're like thinking too hard at all? Like, I don't know. If so, I mean, I'm curious to know at what parts of the workday that, or what kind of task is the most challenging.
So as I kind of mentioned, it's really figuring out exactly how to apply. There's so many different pieces to AI, right? Like there's computer vision, there's large language models, there's like ChatGPT. There's so many different ways in which AI can be used, and figuring out what is the best possible way to use it, and really understanding the how the AI works. I would say that is the hardest part.
Oh, I actually meant as like a product
Oh, as
manager.
a product
Yeah,
manager. I
during
see.
yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah. What part? I basically, to rephrase the question, I guess, like, what is the most challenging part of being a PM to you?
There's a lot of challenging pieces of being a PM. As I kind of mentioned, you're kind of seen as the glue between all of these different aspects of the product. So one is like working with engineering teams. So you need to have a really good technical background because you really need to understand the challenges and issues that are being faced by the engineering team. And if you don't understand, you need to be willing to learn, because if you don't understand what the engineering team is going through, then it's really hard for you to decide what feature sets should be built, how to prioritize the right features for the product. Are we going to be able to get this done in time when we promised customers we'd have this release? That is something that's really difficult. And I will
Mm.
say that it's very hard to estimate when things get done. Even the engineers that are working on these features, even they find it really hard to estimate when things get done. And that is incredibly difficult. I would say another really difficult aspect of being a PM is you have these monthly conversations with senior leadership where you have to talk to them about your product and what's going well, what's going poorly. Sometimes things don't go that well. You might have a month or two where your product is not doing that well, or you just pushed out a new release that broke something. And you have to be able to have these really difficult conversations with leadership where you say, hey, I know this went really poorly, but I still believe in the future of this product. And I would love for you to continue funding this so that we can build out a really amazing product that can impact people's lives. So that is also really difficult because going to your boss and saying, I failed, it's not going that well is really tough. And begging for them to continue to be invested in your product, essentially. So I would say there's a lot of difficult things about being a PM, but I would probably put those two as my top two.
Yeah, that's also interesting because it's both kind of like IQ and EQ of what you just mentioned. So the IQ part of kind of, or the technical aspect of knowing engineering and coding and all of that. And then the EQ part of managing stakeholders upwards and downwards. And I've heard also that you also need to like kind of sometimes pitch to engineers to kind of have them on your project or product so that they spend time with you instead of like working on so many other different things. I actually also had a friend who was an engineer and I was trying to work with him on something. And then I asked him for like a rough timeline. He was like, honestly, I can't give you one. And then for me as like a business person, I was always like, why can't you give me like a rough deadline? But I think the more I worked with him on that project, the more I understood like why it's so hard to give like strict deadlines. But another thing that you kind of mentioned during your answer there was just how difficult it can be to talk to your boss if like your project or product you've been working on hasn't been going well. And so I wanted to ask about Microsoft's culture. Is it one that really allows for tests and failures? And is it kind of, I would assume maybe it's on like a small scale and then you kind of build up as like there's more and more data? Or what is Microsoft's culture like in terms of allowing you to fail?
I think Microsoft has a great culture around and that provides a lot of psychological safety to its employees. In the past, I have seen where if you work on a product and it fails, quite often you'll just get restaffed to another product, or sometimes you can even ask for another product that you want to be placed on. So I do think there is a level of psychological safety there, where they do give you a few more chances if you do fail. And as someone working in the product space, not every product is going to be successful. So it does happen quite often. And that is something I really do appreciate about Microsoft. But again, it is a business. If you are consistently failing over a long period of time, they might see that as there is something wrong there, and then they might take action. So it really just, in a lot of ways, it also really depends on your org and what they want to prioritize, how experimental they are, really what their priorities are in the short term and the long term. But so far, I've had a good experience.
And what is the feedback culture like? Because I think this is unique to finance and banking maybe, but we actually didn't have a ton of feedback. We do a transaction, and then if it went well, then I guess no feedback is good feedback. And then at the end of the year, you have like an annual feedback kind of thing. But I feel like maybe at other companies, there's more of a feedback loop. And I wanted to ask about Microsoft.
So Microsoft has official, we call them connects. I don't know what they're called, where you have a tool where you put in feedback and then your manager puts in their feedback. That happens twice a year. But one of the things that I did to really ensure that I keep getting this consistent feedback is I pretty much to all of the managers I've been very upfront, and I've been like, hey, I want there to be transparency between us. I'm pretty early in career. I really want to learn and grow as fast as I can. So if you do have feedback for me, please share it. And I would appreciate if you shared it immediately, right when something happens, so then I can work on it, improve, really show you the growth that I've made. And I think having that conversation with your manager up front is incredibly helpful, because then they are not afraid to give you feedback, and they understand that you're here to learn and grow. And so it just creates this air of transparency between the two of you.
Yeah, I probably should have done that. And that's actually a great tip for everyone listening. So I was also, I guess, on that note, wanted to ask if you have, I'm sure you're so busy with, oh, by the way, so I guess I could kind of share now that you've actually been working full time while also doing the MBA, which is a very, very small minority of people, if any, really. And so you must have been so busy throughout that entire period. And I'll ask more about that a bit later. But if I wanted to ask if you had any productivity tips or like apps that you use, or are you pretty old school using like a notebook or just like the Notes app on your phone or computer?
I'm very integrated into the Microsoft productivity suite because Microsoft provides a lot of that for free to its employees. So there's Microsoft To Do, there's Outlook, the calendar app, there's OneNote. So one of the things that I would say has been a challenge over the past 2 years is, of course, time management, because there's so many things to do that you can do in an MBA program. There's always competing priorities. Some people even say just doing the MBA is 2 full-time jobs. So I definitely felt like one of the things I struggled with is time management, where I had to schedule every little thing on my calendar. If it wasn't scheduled, it would not get done. So my calendar is probably something that I rely on a lot. And that is one example of something I did. I also use the Microsoft To Do app for things. What's cool about the Microsoft To Do, I know it sounds like I'm pitching Microsoft products right now, but I genuinely do use these products, is you can flag an email in your Outlook and then it shows up in your To Do. And that's something I found incredibly useful. Besides that, I would say, I would really say time management is the biggest one.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I used to use, time boxing on your calendar, right?
Yeah.
Basically setting amount of time for those who don't know of how much time you're going to spend on a particular task and putting on your calendar. So I do that all the time actually. And then I always like move around the times because things always take longer than I think they will. And I did used to use Outlook when I was at JPM, but since then like moved over to Mac, and I do miss Outlook kind of. Like it is actually very good. And I wanted to ask kind of about your work when you're trying to balance both like the MBA plus work. Have you, I don't know, just been like each time, how have you been able to manage expectations from like your boss where maybe they want something? Do you kind of drop everything else MBA related and kind of are just able to work, or?
It really depends on what's required for me, both from school and from my job. So as I kind of mentioned, I think transparency and communication is key. So if I have finals coming up or there's a reason why I'm not able to be my best self at work, I do try to communicate that with my team early on. And I say, hey, next week's going to be a little bit extra busy for me. I might need to take a day off to study. And I've had a lot of support from my team. Through this whole process, I feel like they've really tried to support me, which is, I am very grateful for that. I would say there's been other times where work has been more demanding. And I feel like with the MBA, it's kind of like pick and choose your own adventure. So you can kind of pull back a little bit. If there's some weeks where you're like, okay, I just don't want to do anything MBA related, you don't have to. There's no one that's going to force you to do anything. So it's kind of been come and gone in waves. Like there's been different points at which I've had to give focus completely on Microsoft. And there's been other times where I've had to focus a little bit more on the MBA.
I hope you're enjoying this interview and discussion with Tvisha so far. I just wanted to let you guys know that in case you're interested in getting an MBA one day yourself, then I recently announced a how to get into MBA course called Liquid MBA. The course provides access for all aspects of the MBA application process, access to a library of admitted essays, of which there are 10 per school, and super detailed school-specific advice covering things like student life, academics, clubs, resources, leadership opportunities, essays, and even 30 secrets for each MBA program. We have a 24-hour free trial so you can check out the course for free, and also a no-risk money-back guarantee if you don't get into at least one MBA program. We also provide lifetime access to our Discord community where you can connect with peers and get additional support from me and my team. Admissions consultants often charge $400 to $700 per hour, which is crazy to me. And so for the price of a 1-hour call with a consultant, you get everything I discussed and a whole lot more. So I really am trying to make Liquid MBA a really good deal for you and a no-brainer. And so if you're interested in any of this, feel free to check us out at liquidmba.com and be sure to use code WELCOME25 for a limited time to get 25% off the course. Yeah. Do you feel like going back, you would, or I guess let me ask, why didn't you just kind of take the 2 years off and then go back? Like, what made you want to take on so much?
So for me, it wasn't something that I thought was even possible in the beginning. Like I'm not going to lie about that. I did not know anyone that had done a full-time MBA while working full-time. I was accepted into the 2+2 program. So I got my admit very early on. I knew that I had this acceptance from Wharton. I shared it with my team. I shared it with my skip manager, who's your manager's manager in big tech. And he had done his MBA from MIT while working at Oracle. And he felt very strongly about working while doing the MBA. He felt like it was an incredibly productive journey for him. And so he really pushed me to do both. And he said that he would work with the team to work with my calendar to really create some flexibility so that I'm able to do both. I also think COVID helped because we went fully remote. So I was able to be in Philadelphia full time. And they were fine with me relocating because I was already remote, which also helped. I also wasn't very sure I wanted to do the MBA. I was already working as a product manager in big tech, which is something that a lot of people go to business school to do. So I was pretty conflicted about whether I should take these 2 years off and give myself entirely to the MBA, because I would be losing 2 years of work experience, which in big tech is huge. A lot of your leveling and compensation is completely determined by the years of work experience you have. So I spent a lot of time thinking about whether it was even worth it for me to do an MBA. And what I've heard from most of the people that I've talked to that do have MBAs from top schools is it's a resounding yes. They all really, really enjoyed the experience, and they feel like in the long term, there have been a lot of benefits to doing the MBA. I also noticed that if you look at a lot of women, especially in C-suite positions, there aren't very many women of color. And the few that are there, they have MBAs from top programs. And so I did not want not having one to hold me back in my career. And again, as I mentioned, I had a ton of support from my team, and I had someone really vouching for me in the org that really made it work. And it's been a really great experience so far. And I only have good things to say.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at the tail end now of our 2 years here. And I think looking back at hard and challenging experiences, we always say like, oh, it was totally worth it. But I'm wondering if you had any times where you were at home and you're like, oh, I don't think I can do this. Or like, oh, I'm sacrificing so much. Like, did you have those moments, or was it pretty smooth sailing?
I 100% had those moments. It definitely was not smooth sailing. There were definitely times when I questioned my decision to do both. For a lot of people, the MBA is a 2-year break, especially for folks coming in from IB, where their jobs are incredibly demanding, where they work until 3, 4 a.m. every night. And so a lot of my friends coming in were in a completely different mentality of 2-year vacation versus like I still had to do work. So there definitely were times when I felt quite a bit of FOMO, and I questioned my decision to do both. But now that I'm kind of at the end of it, I do feel like it was the best decision for me. And it really depends on your career trajectory, what you want to do after the MBA. I realized I also wanted to stay in product, as I really enjoyed working as a product manager. I'd worked so hard to get here. I loved my job at Microsoft. It just didn't make sense for me to quit my job because I knew I'd be recruiting for a very similar position after. The only other route I was considering is entrepreneurship and startups, which is still something that I have in the back of my mind. I'm still looking for the right opportunity, but it just made sense for me.
Yeah, and I can relate to you, if not fully, partially, because I've been also kind of working on rareliquid during school. And I feel like for me, there was always this tension of, should I go do this fun thing or should I work? And a lot of times I would kind of be a little bit split between the two. But I was kind of my own boss. So I would let myself go to those things, and not feel like as guilty or as like face as many consequences, I guess. And so, but it must have been such, as you kind of talked about, a busy, challenging past 2 years. So I wanted to ask, what was like 1 or 2 key lessons that you learned during your time at Microsoft while working full-time here while you're doing your MBA, what's something that really like comes to mind?
I think one is it gave me this renewed sense of confidence that I could kind of do anything if I set my mind to it. And I could really, I guess the other aspect of it is I was very busy and my calendar has pretty much been completely full for the past 2 years. And balancing that is something that coming in, definitely, I was very uncertain of whether or not I was going to be able to do it. And I was able to. So as I kind of mentioned, it gave me this like renewed sense of confidence that I could kind of push myself and do anything if I set my mind to it, which is something that I'm really grateful for. In terms of something that I take away from this experience, I feel like it's kind of tough because there's aspects from work that I take away and there's aspects from school that I take away. And I'm trying to think of like combining the two,
Or
my
maybe
learnings
something
is.
from maybe since you did touch upon like balancing the two, maybe something just a recent lesson from working
Mhm.
as a PM.
I guess actually going back to something that I've learned is you should prioritize your health over everything else. It doesn't matter how busy you are. You should make time for both your mental and physical health. That's something that I think early on I was I was like, I can push this to the side and deal with it later. And that's something that I realized that I do want to focus on going forward. And I do think everyone should focus on.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of our classmates have kind of realized during these 2 years. And I wanted to also ask a little bit about your team. And I know you can't really talk too much about what you're working on, but how are like teams structured at Microsoft? Because in your, I guess, I mean, are there just a ton of different products and you're put under one, and then I don't know, are there a bunch of PMs that work on like adjacent products under that one larger product? Like how are things structured?
It really depends because Microsoft is such a big company and every org in Microsoft kind of has their own subculture and their own way of structuring how PMs and devs work together, and also how the PM org is built out. So in my team, for example, my manager owns like a suite of products, and then I manage one of the products in that suite. So it really depends. I know there's other orgs where you have 5 to 10 PMs working on a product if it's a larger product. So yeah, it really depends
Mm.
on the org. I would say that's one of the things that I noticed working at Microsoft is because it's just such a big company. You can have completely different cultures in different parts of the company.
Mm.
So I know I come from a place of privilege where I had a really great experience. I had a great team, a great org, but I've also heard that I know there can be other people that have had not as favorable experiences. So the culture is very different depending
Mm.
on what part of the company you're in. And then also depending on your org, some orgs have been around for a really long time. Some orgs are relatively new. Like the cybersecurity org didn't even exist when I joined. I was initially in cloud and AI. And then a new cybersecurity org was built. So my org is very new, very emerging. And very recently, I think a week or two ago, Microsoft also announced a new AI org. So it vastly different cultures
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
where you are.
So I think that's so true for a lot of big companies in general. It's really very like office or group dependent. But I do want to ask if there is kind of this overall Microsoft culture that exists. Is there, and I know every company has like core values, mission, vision,
Mhm.
statement, and all of that. Do you feel like there is anything like that?
I think definitely. I think leadership tries to perpetuate all of their values that they have set out to. But I think there can still be different subcultures depending on who the manager is and things like that and how long someone's been at the company. I've been lucky. I've had a lot of managers that have been at the company for a really long time. And so they've kind of had to grow and evolve with the different culture over time that Microsoft has had. And they've also had experience working in various different orgs. And so they kind of took all the best aspects of the culture that they were part of and they brought it to our team.
Mm.
But that might not always be true. Sometimes we have people coming from different organizations, and I don't want to name any, but they might come from a place that didn't have as good of a culture or did not provide as much psychological safety to their employees. And that can sometimes lead to negative experiences. But we hope that the interview process weeds out some people like that.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the interview process actually, because I think a lot of people watching this maybe want to be product managers, and I'm sure you have done some like recruiting to recruit new hires and stuff like that. So I guess first on the topic of, since we're talking about Microsoft culture a little bit, for behaviorals, if you guys do ask the question of like why Microsoft, what's a good way to answer that question?
I think the best way to answer it is to really show a lot of excitement for the company, to show that you've really done your research into what the company is working on, what they're focusing on right now. So I'm sure a lot of people know this, but AI is one of the biggest things that Microsoft has recently put a lot of investments in. So that's something that I would expect the candidate to mention, because it's been everywhere, it's all over the news. So keeping up with what the company is doing, what's in the news about the company, really showing your passion and excitement for the company, its values, and the direction in which it's heading.
Okay. And then when it comes to your recruiting process, when you recruited, what was like the process like? Like how many rounds, how long were each of the interviews, and then what kind of questions were asked?
So for me, I recruited over 4 years ago now, and I also recruited through the university grad pipeline. So the way that it worked for me was I went to a career fair, I met a recruiter, I provided them with my resume. I actually think the best way to get an interview is through an on-campus career fair. That's something that I think it even trumps referrals for new grads, because having a relationship with the recruiter is really helpful. The recruiter will then push your application forward. They'll vouch for you. That's the route that I went through. I had a first call with the recruiter where they kind of just asked me about my interests and a little bit about my background, why I think I'd be a good fit for Microsoft. I think in this call, it's really key to sell yourself, have your 30, 45-second elevator pitch, know exactly the aspects of your career and your background that you want to mention to the recruiter to really impress them. I would also say having some passion projects or side projects is incredibly helpful, because that's something that recruiters love to see, that you're really invested in tech and it's something that you are passionate about and that you work on outside of school, outside of your day job. After that, I think it was a 45-minute on-campus interview with an engineer, which was interesting because they didn't ask me if I wanted to be a PM or a software engineer until the end of the interview. So we had the same interview for software engineers and PMs. It was a lead coding question. I think it was it might have been a medium or an easy. I would usually say for PMs, you should be able to lead code easy, medium questions. You'll rarely get a hard. I don't think I've ever gotten one. I don't know anyone that has, but it is possible depending on the company that you're interviewing with.
And can you explain for a lot of people who watch this may be coming from a tech background if this somehow popped up on people's feeds, but a lot of people don't actually know what that, including myself. I don't know what. I think I can get what a lead is. It like a coding question or something like that?
Yeah, it's actually a platform that a lot of people in tech use to prepare for interviews, and it's really great because it asks you a coding question. You type out code for it. It tells you whether or not your code is acceptable, how quickly it ran, what percentile your code is amongst the thousands of people that use LeetCode. It's a great platform. Everyone that I know that recruits for tech uses it.
Got it.
It's predominantly used by software engineers, and some of the questions on there can be incredibly hard. But I actually recommend PMs use it as well, but they can kind of stick to the easy, medium questions and not focus as much on the hard technical questions.
Got it. So then you had that interview, and then what were the remaining ones?
Then after that, I was flown into Seattle for my super day, where I had roughly 5 interviews. They were a mix of product, behavioral, and technical. I think I had 1 technical interview, 2 or 3 product interviews, and then 1 behavioral interview.
And what kind of questions are asked in? Well, I guess starting with the easy stuff, or easy behavioral, do they kind of dig really deep into your resume and kind of drill down whenever you answer something? Or is it kind of like a breadth kind of thing where they ask a lot of various questions? Like what kind of behavioral questions do they ask?
It depends, I would say. The reason why they have the behavioral interviews kind of to determine if you'd be a good fit for the team. I do think a lot of the times it's very important to know your resume super well and be very prepared to be asked anything on your resume. If you put something on your resume, it's fair game for me to ask about it. And I would say have a lot of depth as well, because the interviewer can choose to go really deep on one particular topic. And if it's something on your resume and you're not able to answer about it super well, then that's an immediate no for me. So yeah, I would say depth and as well as breadth.
Got it. And when you prepared for your behavioral questions, or if you are giving advice now to others trying to break into becoming a PM, what kind of tips do you give for preparing for behaviorals?
I think there's a method called the STAR method that people use. I haven't interviewed in a while, so I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but I think it's like situation, task, action,
I
results.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say definitely have really, maybe just go online, look up top 50 behavioral interview questions, kind of go through them with the STAR method. So if you're asked anything in that realm, you're able to answer it in a really structured way. Because I think having really structured thoughts is also something that interviewers look for.
Mm. And then you said there was product and
yeah.
then technical.
Yes, there can also be estimation questions, which is something that
Like
I
market
forgot to
sizing?
mention. As it can be
Or-
anything. It could be, it depends. Sometimes interviewers will ask things like how many golf balls fit in an airplane, or can you estimate the revenue of YouTube? You can really be asked anything.
Yeah.
So the key is to find, again, like structure is super important. Your thought process, how you go about thinking through some of these questions is incredibly important. And the more practice you do, the better you'll get. So
yeah. And
definitely
what
practice.
for product type questions, what kind of questions are asked for those?
There's a large breadth there as well. I think one of the most difficult things of interviewing for PM interviews is you can really be asked anything. And it's just, the questions can be super wide. Like they can ask questions like, explain machine learning to your grandma. Or they can ask questions like, how would you reinvent a garbage can? So the questions can be very weary.
Oh, that sounds tough.
Yeah, I think interviewing for PM is one of the most difficult roles to interview for, just because there's only so much that you can prepare.
Yeah.
And then the rest you kind of have to see how it goes and come up with answers on the spot, which I think is another skill that's really useful.
Yeah.
Is kind of practicing how you think through some of these questions super quickly, because there's almost a guarantee you'll be asked something that you weren't prepared for. But definitely prepare, definitely practice, but there can always be something that just comes up that you're not ready for.
So it sounds like you need both structure and creativity to do well. Do you think that it's either is, it sounds like to me maybe structure might be the most important thing. How important, like what are some of the things you need to do well in these interviews? Like structure, be good at thinking on the spot. Like what are some other things that make for like a star performer during an interview process? Yeah,
I think definitely, as you mentioned, structure, having a good technical background, as I kind of mentioned, or even if you don't have a technical background, I don't think you need a technical background to be a PM, but having a really good understanding of technology really helps. As I mentioned, you can often have coding questions. You can also have system design questions, and you won't be able to answer those unless you've studied for them. So that is a piece that I think a lot of people overlook, but it is super useful to have. I would say you definitely thinking on the spot is another really important one. Good communication skills. That is very important, especially as a PM, because as I mentioned, a lot of the time you spend a lot of time talking to different groups of people, and you have to be very good at getting your point across and kind of being concise with what you're trying to say, so that people focus on what's important. Like you have to be very good at reading through something, figuring out what the most important things are, and being really good at communicating it back. So communication skills also very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Oh, another thing I just thought of is this kind of touches on the creativity piece that you mentioned, but as a PM, you're also a lot of the times the person that's being part of the strategy discussions for the product. And one of the key pieces of being able to discuss the strategy of the product is really understanding the market of the product. So having a vision for what the future of the market could be, or what the future of the product looks like, I think that is something that is also really important that sometimes interviewers will try and gauge.
So then when you are trying to get smart on an industry and maybe for AI, for example, like how do you get information? Like I know you're probably working at the company, so you're like fed all this information all the time. But for people like me, maybe who want to just be smart on tech trends or AI, are there like newsletters you follow or websites that you would recommend?
I think TechCrunch is a great place. They are very up to date on all of the tech news. That's incredibly helpful. In terms of like industry trends and directions in which the industry is heading, I would say there's Gartner and Forrester publish these PDFs on industries that are also great to read. The only issue with that is a lot of the time they come with a paywall, so you might not want to pay for those, which can be kind of tough. I would say besides that, just reading the news and kind of keeping up with what's going in tech is one of the best things you can do.
So when you were recruiting, it was, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago. So things might have changed a lot. But when you are maybe suggesting to people resources to use for recruiting for the PM role, are there any that come to mind?
I think Exponent is a great one. It's a website where people post interview questions. I sometimes people even post interview questions on Blind. So just looking through Blind and seeing if there's anything on there for the particular company that you're interviewing for. Besides that, there were a couple of books that I had read. I think Decode and Conquer was one of them. It provides sample product questions and it kind of talks you through how to structure some of those questions, which I found really helpful. What else? Lead Code, as I mentioned, for the technical piece. There's a system design interview primer on GitHub that is great for system design questions. Yeah, I think that's all I used. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a good list. And when you were at Microsoft, so what I know is that you have patents. Is that correct? So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, happy to. I think one of the parts of my job that I really enjoy, as I mentioned, is working on emerging technologies, but also having the freedom and creativity to come up with new ideas and then have the ability to influence that and build that out. I do think Microsoft also does push a culture of innovating and creativity. We have hackathons every few months that they encourage employees to participate in. So if there's a hackathon going on, you can usually talk to your manager and say, hey, I really want to focus on the hackathon this week. Is there a way for me to can we work together on my schedule so that I'm able to participate? And I think a lot of people in Microsoft are really excited about working on things like this. So it's a lot of fun to come up with new ideas and like go work with engineers to build it out and then file patents for it. Microsoft also has a patent team that you can work with. So if you have an idea and you've kind of built out a POC you can kind of work with the patent team to file the patents, which is they're great. Like we tell them our idea, we talk through how it works, we tell them exactly what we built, and they will work with us to file the patent.
Got it. But what was it that you patented?
Oh, so I have multiple different patents. They're all kind of in the AI cybersecurity domain. The one that's already published is on my LinkedIn profile, which is around using NLP. It's very complicated. I don't know. You have to have...
You're like, you won't understand.
No, I just think you'd have to have a good understanding of cybersecurity and AI to really understand what it is.
Gotcha. But so it's something in that space,
yes,
basically.
They're all in that space.
Got it.
Yeah.
And when you're like employed by Microsoft, they're helping you with the patent process, they don't own it at all? Like it's all purely yours? Or is it like some co-ownership somehow?
It's a co-ownership. They do own the patent, but your name is on it, and they also give you a little bit of compensation for it, depending on how it's used and things like that.
Okay. So then if someone were to, I don't know if you purchase or license the technology or something, then you get a portion of it, something like that. Okay, that's interesting. Cool. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about your more day-to-day responsibilities. So I think people are always wondering, what is a life of a product manager like?
It's a lot of meetings, I will say. Spend a lot of time talking to different people. So I work with the customers to take their feedback, figure out what needs to be improved in the product, work on determining what the features are, work with the engineers to prioritize those features, figure out what we can accomplish in a set timeline. work with security subject matter experts to figure out where the industry's heading, where the product should go in, kind of creating like the strategy and vision for the product, work with leadership to communicate how the product's doing, what are some highlights of the product, what are some lowlights, how are we working to fix the lowlights, what are our plans, when are we having our next big release, a lot of that type of stuff on a day-to-day basis.
So what is your personal like favorite part and then kind of least favorite part about being a PM?
I think my favorite part about being a PM is coming up with an idea, drawing out mocks, and then watching the engineers actually build something that you just drew out and watching it come to life. I think that is by far my favorite part of it. And then having customers actually use it and getting a lot of the positive feedback from them that, hey, this tool was great. I think this is fantastic. It's the best feeling in the world. The lowlights, of course, are things don't always go according to plan. And sometimes you get, actually not even sometimes, all the time, you get a lot of negative feedback from your customers as well. And it can be a little heartbreaking because you're like, oh, I spent so much time on this. And the engineers feel the same way too, where they're like, oh, I spent so much time on this and now there's all of these things that need to be improved, or there's all of these things the customers don't like. But I think you really have to see it as a learning opportunity. And it's amazing to get quality feedback from your customers because you can't improve your product without it. So I've been really trying to see it more in a positive light.
Yeah. Always about the growth mindset.
Yes, which is something Microsoft does perpetuate.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And I also wanted to ask about what you feel like makes for a good fit for the PM role versus someone who may not be a good fit.
That is a great question. I think you have to be someone that really enjoys spending a lot of time talking to people versus someone who really mostly enjoys the quant and technical aspect. Because if you are really technical and you really enjoy the technical piece, sometimes that is something that can be a little bit lacking for a PM because I don't really write code as much anymore. I'm still required to know how to. And if I want to, I should be able to like query a SQL database. We don't have to go into detail on what that means, but
I roughly know what that means.
Awesome. But the TLDR is, I do sometimes miss it because when you're writing code, you can write code and immediately see the impact that it has and how it's made a difference to the product. But as a PM, you don't have that immediate gratification. And that is something that I definitely missed when I became a PM. And you can scratch that itch with other things like side projects, building your own projects on the side, and things like that. But I would say if you're someone that is genuinely incredibly passionate about writing code and being the person that built out the product in that way, then you probably want to enjoy being a PM because a lot of being a PM is having meetings with different people, talking to different people, which not everyone enjoys.
And what are hours like when you're, and maybe on a good week, an average week, and then a very busy week?
It kind of depends on your team and the culture and also what you want out of your job. So if you're like gunning for a promotion or something, then you might be working way more than 40 hours a week. But if you're not, then tech does, and Microsoft especially, does like to provide work-life balance to their employees. So you can kind of pick and choose if you just aren't that motivated, you don't have to work that many hours. You can work your 40 hours a week and be done. So it really just depends. But I would say compared to other industries like IB, where you're kind of based on what I've heard from my friends, is a lot of the times you're like forced to work until 3 or 4 a.m. every single night. I feel like that's something that tech, again, depends on the company, depends on the team, also depends on a lot of different things. Like, especially on a cybersecurity team, if something breaks, there can be times where you'll get pinged on a weekend or on Christmas or in the middle of the night, and you do have to be there. And a lot of software engineers have on-call, which is when they have to be available 24/7 for a week every quarter and things like that. So I would say it kind of depends on a lot of factors.
Got it. Actually, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, but I would say on average, I think tech has much better work-life balance than a lot of other industries.
Yeah. So you're saying roughly around 40 is average for you. And then maybe if it's a lot, does it go up to like 50, 55, something like that?
I don't know. It just depends. I feel like you might not have to, but I'm the type of person where if I feel like I can do something, I just want to get it done, then I'll just work as much as I have to get it done. So it just, yeah, I just really depends. I don't think I've like kept track of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've been a PM for 4 years, and I think back to my own corporate life where my first 6 months versus my last year at JPM, like I was so much more efficient, so much better at my job. And so I'm wondering for your journey as a PM, generally speaking as well, what are you really most PMs kind of bad at the beginning?
Mhm.
And then let's start with that and then I have a follow-up. What are most PMs bad at the beginning?
Thinking long term about the product. I think it's very easy to think very short term about a product, especially as an super early in career PM. Usually you're really focused on getting that first MVP out to customers, and then you're really focused on getting customer retention, getting customers to use the product. And it can be kind of difficult to think long term and have a vision. Okay, 2-3 years out, where do I want this product to be? And that's something that I think you kind of develop as you continue working as a PM. Like you start realizing how important that piece is and how you really need that aspect in order to build a successful product.
Well, I guess that kind of answers my follow-up question, but maybe you have another answer. Wanted to ask, since you've been working as a PM for 4 years now, what you feel like where you see like so much growth, if you compare yourself to where you were at in your first month. I remember when I was working, like I was so inefficient in so many ways. So what were you able to really develop and you feel like, wow, I'm really good at these things now as a PM?
There's so many pieces because this was my first job out of college. I really did not know how to do a lot of things. And I'm also grateful. I had a lot of great mentorship in the org, which is something I also recommend is find people in the positions that you want to be in. And they can also help and guide you through a lot of the pieces. I would say so many things. Keeping track of all of the various tasks that I have to do, ensuring that nothing drops off or I don't forget to do anything. Again, the time management piece can be is something that's super important that I don't think I was the best at when I started. You have to be really organized as a PM, and I want to say that is something also that took a little bit of work and that I got better on over time. The other piece is maintaining really strong relationships, strong communication skills. You really want to work with the people that you work with, like the engineers, the designers, etc. You want to have good relationships with them, and you need to be really good at being able to build and maintain those relationships. Sometimes things can get a little difficult or get a little heated. You might not always agree on things, but you need to learn how to manage those relationships in a way where you don't damage them.
And what do you feel like is being a product manager is oftentimes very glamorized by a lot of people. And so I wanted to ask what is it could be a small detail, it could be something big, something about the work as a PM that you just don't know about until you're actually in it. And it's kind of prevalent amongst all PMs where this part of the job is, kind of tough, not that great.
I think there's two things. The first really is the technical aspect that I talked about, where as a PM, you still need to be super technical, have a really great understanding of the technology. But as I mentioned, you're not the main person writing the code to build out the product. And as someone who has a really technical background, that is something that I think I did miss a lot when I first started. But there were so many other aspects of being a PM that I enjoyed that I was like, okay, this is still the right path for me. And I can kind of do projects on the side to like keep up my coding skills. The other piece of it is, sorry, it kind of slipped my mind.
No, all good. So do you want to think about it or do you want to?
Wait, I want a second to think about it because I like literally just thought about it and then I forgot.
No worries.
What was the question again?
The question was basically something unglamorous or something.
Oh, yeah. So the other piece of it is that if you're working on an emerging product or an emerging technology, there's a very high chance of failure. And I think failing is, in academia, it's hard not to fail. It's kind of structured in a way where they want you to pass, you want to graduate. But when you're out in the real world, there's so much uncertainty. And I think dealing with that failure is something that I definitely struggled with in the beginning. And I think as a PM, that's something you should you need to be quite mentally strong and optimistic, because it's like I said, it's like being CEO of your product. It's like working on a startup, and most startups fail.
Yeah. I mean, talking from experience where my startup failed and I invested a lot of money and time into it, yeah, that can definitely be tough. And moving on from kind of like PM responsibilities and all, like what the life is like, I also had a more kind of practical-ish question about just compensation, which a lot of people want to know about as well. What can you share about what compensation looks like for a product manager, like where it kind of starts and what the progression looks like over time?
Yeah. So I think for new grads now, compensation ranges from 200 to 250K total comp. It depends on a lot of factors, including your bonus, the stock, how well the stock does, how well the company's doing. Also, what companies you're working at. Different companies have different compensation structures. I would say PMs usually get paid the same as engineers, if not more, depending on leveling and a lot of other factors, as I kind of mentioned. There's no ceiling for compensation really. It just depends. I think PM is often seen as a gateway into senior leadership positions, into VP, director, C-suite positions. So it kind of depends on where your trajectory goes.
And on that note, then, where do you kind of see yourself, I guess, like 5 to 10 years from now? I mean, I know right after MBA, you're planning to work at Microsoft. And so do you feel like you hope to just be at the company for the long term, or maybe like 30 years from now? Like, where do you see yourself?
I honestly do not know. That is something that I'm still figuring out for myself. I really have enjoyed being at Microsoft, as I've mentioned, and I think Microsoft has a great culture, and it's been a really great experience so far. As I kind of mentioned, entrepreneurship is something that I'm also interested in. That is something I do want to try out at some point in time. I haven't decided when or where or how.
Yeah.
So I would say for me, I'm still figuring it out.
Got it. And bringing the conversation a little bit to the MBA now, coming from a kind of tech background, what classes have you enjoyed the most at Wharton so far?
I took a lot of, so I majored in finance and management. I came in with really no understanding of finance besides buy low, sell high. And so that was something that I really wanted to develop through the MBA program. And Wharton's one of the best places to do it. I would say one of my favorite classes at Wharton is valuations with Professor David Wessels. That class was amazing. Like it literally taught me the basics of finance. It made me get way more interested in finance as well. So I highly recommend that if you're at Wharton. Some other great, I took an entrepreneurship class that I really loved. I took negotiations, which was super fun. In general, I think management was really helpful in building up some of the softer skills. I feel as though I have a better understanding of the type of leader and the type of manager I want to be. And I think the kind of the quant finance skills were also really important in being able to understand how to manage a business.
You mentioned you've kind of learned about what kind of leader you want to be. So how would you describe that? What kind of leader do you want to be?
I want to be a good, I don't, this is a tough question. I think having, as I kind of mentioned, you need to have really great vision. And that's something that I think is really important as a leader. But another piece of it that I also think is really important is having empathy. I think in one of our pre-term classes, we had this reading on dealing with emotions at work and how traditionally people say that having emotions at work is seen as a very negative thing. But in reality, emotions are feedback mechanisms. And so by having high EQ, you can actually look at the people that you're talking to, really read their body language, really understand where they're coming from, and you can learn to be a more empathetic leader, and you can also learn to build stronger relationships that last longer. You can really understand whether or not they're happy in their role, they're happy in their careers. You can work on developing them as people and as professionals. And I feel like that's a key piece that people don't often think about.
Wow. You talking about preterm makes me realize how far we've kind of come these past 2 years. And I wanted to also just ask about, what was one of your favorite experiences during your 2 years here?
I have two. So I would say number one was the Quantico Leadership Intensive.
Oh, I just did that recently too.
I really enjoyed it.
too.
It was incredible to see the kind of discipline that you have to be a Marine. I was incredibly impressed. And all I could think about is, wow, I am not that disciplined. And I would love to get there someday. So that was a really cool experience. And also pushing yourself physically is something that I think another piece that I really enjoyed. Another experience that I really loved was I did the Paris GMC, which was the luxury retail GMC. And it was just an incredible experience to be able to go to Paris and to have the access that we had to top executives at all the top fashion brands. Like we got to meet the head of fashion of Chanel and the head of fashion of France. We got to meet some other really cool executives from Louis Vuitton and other top luxury brands, which I don't think I would have had access to without the Wharton brand. So that was also a really cool experience.
Yeah, I really want to comment on those too, because for Quantico, for me too, was one of the top experiences I had. And to fill people in, like you go in at night and then you get yelled at by drill sergeants. For us, we got in pretty late. So then I was only able to sleep for like an hour max. And then you get woken up at like 4 a.m. We started off with the mud swamp quickly, like swim thing. So you're like literally head all the way down into like muddy water, going through like barbed wire and stuff. And
it's ice cold.
Yeah, it's so cold.
It's so cold.
Did you do it in the winter or?
Yeah, I did it in December, which was awful.
Yeah. And so for me, I just did it a few weeks ago and it was around 30 something degrees water, which was still really cold for me. And we had to wait for our teammates. And so it was literally the coldest I've ever been. And so physically, it was also quite a challenge. And
I think they even tell you that you won't get frostbite because we'll pull you out before you do, but you'll get close to it, which was terrifying.
Yeah. And then for the Paris GMC, I feel like that is like a dream for a lot of girls in particular, because, you know, guys aren't as into fashion and luxury brands. And yeah, I saw that one. And I think a lot of my friends who went on that really enjoyed that one too. But I also wanted to ask you a few kind of more random fun questions. First of which is, if you were in an alternate universe and not a product manager, what do you feel like you would be doing instead?
As I mentioned, I think the entrepreneurship route is probably what I'd be doing. That is something that has always been on my radar, and it is something that I hope to try out at some point in time.
Yeah. And then what's something that you've changed your mind about that was kind of important to you over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
So I think one of the things that I think I've changed my mind about is I used to think that you should only work really hard in your 20s and you should really devote yourself to building your career and figuring out your professional life. But one of the things that I've realized is life is kind of short and it's very unpredictable. And so I think you should also live your life, like have great experiences in your 20s and not be so focused on that aspect. I would say it's important to enjoy the journey because it's not sustainable otherwise.
Yeah. So it's funny that, or I guess, I don't know, it's interesting that you mentioned that because you were able to do the best of both worlds kind of by building your career and doing the MBA at the same time. So it makes kind of a lot of sense for you to say that, I guess. And then the other question I had for you was, what is your highest contrarian, most contrarian high conviction thought or idea?
So this might only be contrarian for people in big tech, but I think big tech has this culture where people switch jobs every year to 18 months because you can negotiate a higher compensation, sometimes even get a promotion. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there is a lot of value in staying at a company and building really strong relationships and kind of moving up in that way as well. And I think that's something that people there's just a very strong culture of leaving every year and a half in big tech.
Yeah, I have heard that as well. And someone I spoke to recently said that when you think about compensation ranges in tech, a lot of the best ways for you to increase is by going to like a different firm because then they'll kind of increase you or something like that. I mean, do you feel like that is is that true? Is there any validity to that?
Oh, there is 100% validity to that. There's some companies that will give you 100K sign-on bonuses just to join. And you definitely can negotiate more stock, higher compensation. Also depends. The market was very hot right before I started business school. And so the offers were crazy. I think they were even giving like newer grads 300-400K sometimes if they had enough offers to negotiate. And also switching a year in, you could negotiate an offer that was significantly higher than your current compensation. So there is a lot of, I would say there is validity to that. I do think the market has slowed down now. And so I don't think the offers are as crazy as they were 2 years ago. Don't know if we'll ever get back there again.
Right.
But I think the flip side of it was there were also a lot of layoffs. So a lot of people that switched around that time frame, it's likely that they also did get laid off. They didn't have as strong relationships in their organization. They didn't have their leadership wasn't looking out for them because they didn't know who they were. So there kind of is two sides to that coin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then last question I have for you is, if you could go back to your former self, maybe you're 15, 18 years old, what would you tell yourself?
I think I've always been the type of person that thought I thrived on stress, where I was like, oh, the more stressed out I am, the more high performing I can be. But I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that they're not mutually exclusive things, and I don't need to be stressed out in order to be high performing. And so if I could go back to my younger self, I'd be like, really work on kind of managing my stress levels and like not making that what fuels me, like really finding something you're passionate about, finding your calling so that you find more inner fulfillment versus really just running on stress.
Yeah. Actually, one follow-up I do want to ask is, since you mentioned calling and you've probably done a lot of thinking over the past 2 years with your MBA and all of that, do you feel like you have any sense of what your calling might be?
I think my calling is definitely to work in big tech. Not in work in, actually, wait, let me rephrase that. Not to work in big tech. It's to work on high tech products. I think I'm really passionate about working on emerging technologies and building products that have the ability to influence thousands and millions of people. And I've come to the conclusion that that is exactly where I need to be. And it's more a matter of, do I want to do that in big tech? Do I want to do that in a startup? Do I want to start my own company? But I think that is what it is for me personally. Got
it. Well, I'm excited to see, where your journey takes you. And I'm so amazed that you were able to do the MBA plus work as a PM full-time throughout these past 2 years. And I think a lot of people watching this will honestly be pretty inspired by your story and all the insights and advice you're able to give. So thanks so much for your time, Tvisha.
Thank you so much as well. I really enjoyed this process, and I appreciate you providing the ability to give back to people that are interested in recruiting for big tech. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have more questions, or you're just looking to learn more about breaking into product or breaking into big tech.
Okay, you got to be careful because you're probably gonna get a lot of messages. But yeah, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up this episode. If you watched from start to finish or really gone through any part of it, you probably just also come to the same realization as me that Tvisha is really one of the most impressive people that really is out there. And I just can't imagine doing a full-time job while also doing a Wharton MBA at the same time. And if you want to support this podcast in any way and are interested, definitely check out Exponent. You can get ready for your PM and tech interviews for as little as $12 a month. And also, if you're interested in getting an MBA, check out Liquid MBA at liquidmba.com and use code WELCOME25 to get 25% off for the MBA course I've been working super hard on for the past 1.5 years. So I'll leave a link and information to all of this in this episode's description. Hope you all enjoyed and learned a lot. Let me know in the comments if there's anything more that you want to see. And with that said, thank you all so much for tuning in, and see you guys in the next episode. Thanks, guys, and peace out.